man, Lego is really going out there and pulling our leg. This is from 4 days ago, so why are we making a video about this? Well, it's because 4 days ago I was going out on a trip, so I, unfortunately, was not able to cover what was talked about by Josh Elliott Wolf and Dom Stramati on Sportsnet 650's The People Show, with Rick Dhaliwal on as a guest. This was from Friday. I understand. I know it was from a while ago, but let's be real. There are so few things to go out there and talk about in the offseason at this time, and I don't necessarily want to make a video about Capo Caco signing with the Kraken, that we are going over some of the, what do I call this? Unturned stones. That's what it is, yeah. The unturned stones that had gone and passed from days ago. Because if we're not going to find anything new, then might as well go out there and talk about what has already been put out there, and just make sure we cover our bases. So let's go out there and read Canucks News summary about Rick Dhaliwal's interview on The People Show from last week on Friday, because there's a lot to dive into here. As always, Rick Dhaliwal provides the scoop. It's just, this was 4 days ago, so we have a lot of time to digest everything that was talked about and where the Canucks are coming from. So let's get started with the Dakota Joshua trade now, shall we? Rick goes out there onto the program and says that the Joshua trade had been coming for a while. The Vancouver Canucks had talked to a lot of teams about Joshua. It was also about cap relief, but Dhaliwal believes that the Vancouver Canucks might have soured on Dakota Joshua. Now, you know what? That actually does not feel all too unbelievable, because I do think that based off of some of the other conversations we had seen about Dakota Joshua and the Vancouver Canucks, there does seem to have been maybe an issue or two that the Canucks had with Joshua's, let's just say, conditioning and or his work ethic in the games. He did have a lingering hip issue for most of the season, and that obviously did hold him back from playing his best game. But here's the thing, the guy did have cancer. That's been very well documented. The guy had problems with his health throughout the course of the year after the cancer was removed. It's just, I don't know if there was enough from Joshua this previous season that allows the Vancouver Canucks to be hopeful that this is still the guy that they signed to a contract that they were already uncomfortable with at the time of the contract signing. That is a pretty big deal, and I think for a lot of Canucks fans, it's a little difficult to process that because of how Joshua was effective last year. A lot of people love Dakota Joshua, but I've been seeing so much backlash to the trade, and I don't really know if I fully agree with it. So let's continue on here. Joshua knew he was getting traded by the end of the week. Not surprising, he could probably read the tea leaves, probably people in his ear telling him what's going on. The Maple Leafs were going to be after him after he had reached UFA the previous summer, so Toronto, they get themselves a guy that they really like. The Flyers wanted him, but they would have had to trade players to fit him in. Yeah, okay, send Matvei Michkov over to Vancouver, please. Of course, Rick Tocchet would have wanted Dakota Joshua. Man, the pulling power that this guy has is insane. Yogi, Noah Juleson, Dakota, Philadelphia would have been getting all the Vancouver Canucks. You talk about the Canucks being former Penguins, while the Flyers were going to be former Canucks if things had continued down that path. Dhaliwal then goes out there and speaks out about Jack Roslovic. They've talked to him, the Canucks have, but he's talking to many teams. Dhaliwal also doesn't get the sense that the Vancouver Canucks are particularly close on signing Roslovic. The Canucks have also tried to acquire him for a while, which does make sense. It has been reported that Vancouver has been in on Jack Roslovic for years, even going back to some of the other trade situations that he had with other teams. But Roslovic, skilled center, maybe not the full answer to Vancouver's second-line center needs, but definitely a guy who's probably more projectable in that role than Filipino, I guess you could say. Speaking about second-line centers, there is a bigger conversation about that after. They talk about Mason McTavish. Dhaliwal guesses that McTavish is looking for about $7 to $8 million on his next contract. It would cost multiple high draft picks and top prospects to acquire him. So the Vancouver Canucks, they don't have the assets to get him. Which ultimately does make sense. The price for McTavish would be very high in Vancouver. While they do have a prospect or two that is valuable, it's probably not enough to go out there and grab McTavish, but still, it makes for a fun headline to dive into the hypotheticals, whether or not Vancouver could make this trade go down. But it's probably not going to happen, unfortunately. We can still talk about it, but it's probably not going to happen. Now let's go over onto the other talk here. Second line center market. Dhaliwal goes out there and says a ton of teams are looking for second line center. Prices are very high, and they haven't gone down. Not surprising there. Then there is an extended conversation on Kefir Sherwood. Take a look at this. The Vancouver Canucks would like to extend Sherwood this summer. They have had preliminary extension talks, and the team is very impressed with Sherwood's work ethic. That is all great to see too, but I just go out there and wonder if the Vancouver Canucks fall into the same trap with Sherwood like they did with Dakota Joshua the other year. Now, to be fair, I think Sherwood is a better player than Joshua. I think he's more versatile. I think he brings more to the table. I think he drives pace a little bit better. I think he's got a better goal-scoring element. Joshua's better in front of the net. He's good with his reach, he has really good hands in tight, and he's a dog. But then again, Sherwood's a dog too. He broke the record for most hits in a season in the recorded NHL hits tracking era. He's a very, very good player who plays with a lot of speed and who has some very good work ethic, so I'm not surprised that Vancouver is particularly impressed with that element of Kiefer Sherwood's game. Let's go out there and talk about some of the final notes, though. This is what Dhaliwal goes out there and talks about in regards to Connor Garland. He wouldn't be surprised if Garland got an invite to the USA Olympic training camp. Whoa, really? Hot damn, man. Connor Garland, an Olympian? That would be awesome. When Garland, Demko, and Besser re-signed, a lot of people around the league took notice that 3 Americans chose to stay in Vancouver. Nice. Really nice. You like to see that, right? Vancouver putting themselves on the destination chart for now, with 3 Americans deciding that they wanted to be here instead of anywhere else. Let's scroll down and talk about some of these final notes here. Dhaliwal then talks about Bowen Byram. The Vancouver Canucks' interest in him was real and serious. They did try to acquire Byram, but the Sabres want too much. The Canucks have tried to acquire him over the last 2 to 3 months, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes in 2 years. Dhaliwal says, though, he doesn't think we have heard the last of Bowen Byram and the Vancouver Canucks. It's almost like a supervillain wandering off back into his layered cave in defeat. Don't you think you've heard the last of me there, Batman? Oh, that's kind of chilly. But still, Bowen Byram, we already made a video about him earlier in today's show. Seems like the guy is probably going to get traded, but not right away. The guy signed a contract that takes him straight to UFA status, and the Buffalo Sabres have already been documenting to wanting to trade this guy away. He also could be in a spot where he wants out. It doesn't look like a long-term fit at all between Bowen Byram and the Buffalo Sabres, so we are just going to have to wait and see if and when a trade actually does go down. And where does he get traded to? That's the big question here. Finally, on Filip Chytil, Dhaliwal has a note here at the bottom. Chytil is healthy in training, so that's very good. You don't want to see any Canucks player lose out on a summer of off-season training like Dakota Joshua and Elias Pettersson did last year. Filip Chytil seems like he's been good to go for a while now. We just have to hope that that consistently maintains itself over the course of the upcoming year. I'm not optimistic, but still, we can hope, right? That's what matters the most here. So with all that in mind, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Rick Dhaliwal's interview on The People's Show on Sportsnet 650? What are your thoughts on Dhaliwal's commentary on Jack Roslovic, Mason McTavish, Bowen Byram, and more? And how do you feel about the fallout of the Dakota Joshua trade, as discussed here by Rick? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.